BlogTalkRadio, the world's largest online radio network.
Hey, how are you doing? My name is Dean Dwyer, and I am guest hosting for Mr. Sean Croxton this week, who is off on a much-deserved vacation. He's somewhere on the planet. We don't know exactly where he's at, but he is somewhere. Might even be listening into this as I speak. Sean, you deserve the time off, my friend, so enjoy yourself. I mean, seriously, the guy has put on more summits than a world leader, so he definitely needs the time off. He has most certainly earned it. As I mentioned at the start of this show, my name is Dean Dwyer. I am a blogger over at MakeShiftHappen.org. I also have a podcast on iTunes by the same name, which you may or may not heard of, and I have a book also by the same name, Make Shift Happen, and you can find that on Amazon, and it's all about changing how you look, but changing how you think. Anyhow, there was a little bit of a shameless plug for a few of the things that I'm doing. You can certainly check those out if you're interested. What I'd like to do today is respect your time. So my topic that I'm going to talk about, I was trying to come up with something interesting, something I haven't done, maybe something that Sean hasn't done, and what I've opted to talk about are 15 things I wish I knew when I had started this transformation journey. Now, I'm going to try and keep this under 30 minutes. So I'm going to try and be as brief as I can with each of the 15 points that I talk about so that you get the gist of what the message is. But I do want to say this, that some of the things I'm going to talk about may not mean anything to you at this point on your journey. You'll obviously understand them conceptually, but you may not be in a place at this point in time where you can actually do anything with them. All I would suggest to you is this. Don't dismiss them until you have at least tried them. I'm not saying go out and try them all now. What I'm saying is just be open to the idea that as you continue to evolve on this journey, that some of these things that I'm talking about may make more sense once you get down the road a little bit with this and you have burst through some of the things that maybe are holding you back and those sorts of things. And I can say that because that's exactly how it worked for me. I basically did a bunch of stuff for 25 years. It was like just a big black hole. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just doing stuff, and it was only once I kind of got to the age of 45, which was a couple of years ago, that I really started to have this massive shift in how I went about approaching this stuff. So that's the only thing that I'm going to ask you to sort of keep in mind as we go through that. Other than that, I did want to just briefly talk about my story in case you haven't heard of me before. I have been on Sean's show a couple of times. I was on the Paleo Summit, which was awesome. And I've also, Sean interviewed me for my book that I had released, I think that was sometime back about 3 months ago as well. So you may have heard me there also. My approach to this is probably a little bit different than most people in the sense that I don't talk much about the nutrition or exercise portion of this because, quite frankly, I don't really think that that's what most people are struggling with. At least that's not what I was struggling with. I had always been active. I always ate fairly well, and yet I had very little to show for my efforts. And so I tried to take a different approach with this. If it wasn't a diet, I mean, obvious, and I'm not saying diet and exercise aren't important. They're very important. But they're not the only components on this journey, and I think too many people focus only on those two, and they don't take a look at who they are and why they do what they do, and as a result, they never, ever seem to get to where it is that they're trying to get to, or they make a few steps forward, and then they take 3 steps back, that sort of thing. So, but yeah, vegetarian for 19 years, always struggled with my weight. I was never obese, but I was always 30 or 40 pounds overweight, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I did a lot. I was really active. I ate really well. As a vegetarian, you know, I ate nothing but whole organic foods, and so I should have had a lot more to show for the amount of work that I had done on both sides of those scales, but unfortunately I didn't, and it looked more like I had eaten a vegetarian. I don't know what it was. It just, that particular way of eating did not work for my body type. Again, took me 19 years to realize that, though, and there's a message in and of itself with that, you know, had I been thinking differently, I probably would have abandoned vegetarianism after the first year. I would have realized that way of eating just didn't work for my particular body type, but I just didn't have the foresight to think that way. So that's a little bit about my story. If you want, I do have another website that I publish to very infrequently now, but it tells more of my story. If you go to beingprimal.com, on my About page, you'll see I go into more detail about, you know, sort of how I got into all this and, how I approached the whole transformational thing. So you can get more information there if you want. So listen, let's jump right into these 15 ideas. The first thing that I wish I knew, and when I say I wish I knew, I'm talking like back when I was 20, when I first realized that I was gaining weight, and I just started doing a bunch of crap because I thought that just doing what everybody else does. These are things that I wish I knew when I was 20. Number one, embrace empirical knowledge. And empirical knowledge is information that you know to be true because it works or doesn't work for you. You've already tested it on your body. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. Part of my journey that led me to paleo was that I came across Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Body. And in that, Tim talks about, I say Tim like I know him, Mr. Ferriss talks about the slow-carb breakfast. And I was still vegetarian at the time. Made perfect sense. It worked within the vegetarian philosophy because it was eggs, beans, and veggies. So I started doing that in the mornings, which was a big shift because I was eating these fruit shakes in the morning normally. So I started doing that, did that for 3 weeks, and I actually started to put on weight. And it was the first time that I had ever discovered that a particular food made me fat, and it was beans. That was the only thing that I had changed in my diet. Everything else had stayed the same. And so that was a real eye-opener for me. So even though Tim Ferriss talks about and promotes this idea of a slow-carb breakfast, it does not work for my body type. And that's my empirical knowledge. Now, I don't go out and tell people his ideas don't work. There's a lot of things that work. And I do think that slow-carb breakfast certainly works for some people, but it didn't work for me. And so that's a really, really important concept to embrace on this journey. It doesn't matter. I don't care who they are. I don't care if it's Mark Sisson, if it's Rob Wolf, if it's Dr. whoever. It doesn't matter. They can throw their ideas out there, but once I've tested them on me, then I have evidence of whether they work or not. And if they don't work, I just discard them. That's it. It doesn't matter. I said it doesn't matter who promotes it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Number two, focus on outcomes, not behaviors. So we all do the same thing, right? We want to change how we look, and so we focus solely on weight loss, which is an outcome. And that doesn't mean anything because we can lose. I mean, I can force myself to lose 20 or 30 pounds, but we can do that in a way that's just very unhealthy and not sustainable long term. What we want to be looking at on this journey, and this was a massive shift that I made before I even started with the whole paleo thing. When I sort of addressed the fact that I needed to make some changes, this was one of them, that I needed to begin to focus on behaviors that promoted the possibility of weight loss. So that would include things like preparing your foods in advance, which people don't want to do, creating and following a meal plan, which again, people don't want to do that because it's work, or recording your foods, which people can't stand that last one when I tell people that that's a great thing for people to incorporate when they first start. But those are the kinds of behaviors that actually promote weight loss. And if you started talking to people who have managed to not only transform how they look, but maintain it, you would hear those same sorts of things coming up from other people as well. Of course, it differs from person to person, but you want to focus on behaviors as opposed to simply this outcome of losing weight because it means nothing. Number three, do stuff that sucks. Now, let me explain what that means. When people get into this, even though people say, no, I'm willing to do whatever I want to do, the truth is they're not willing to do whatever they want to do. They want something quick, they want something easy, they want something fast, and they want to see results yesterday. But if you are truly committed to changing how you look, then you need to embrace the fact that you're going to do things that are not going to be very sexy at the beginning, that they're not enjoyable, that they're not fun. Recording your foods at the beginning sucks. Nobody likes doing that, but it's important at the beginning to collect data. Preparing meals in advance sucks. It takes a lot of time. You've got to spend hours in the kitchen, but it makes a big difference. Trying to do essential exercises like a pull-up, for example, sucks. And I know this. When I first started, I used to avoid pull-ups because I couldn't do them. And I realized that if I was going to change how I looked, that I needed to be able to do some of these really core exercises, and a pull-up was one of them. And so I committed to that each and every week. And initially I could only do one, and it was not pretty. But it sucks at the beginning. I can do quite a few now, but it took a while to get to that stage. Getting up early sucks. But again, getting up early is essential if you want to allow yourself the time you need to change how you look. Accepting full responsibility for your actions, that sucks. I would much rather blame somebody else. It's easier. But when we begin to embrace some of these things that we don't enjoy, some of these things that are not sexy, some of these things that are not fun, that is when the changes begin to happen. I can almost tell you right away, if somebody says that they want to lose weight, and I say, well, listen, the first thing you have to do is record your foods, and they don't want to do that, I already know that they're not going to have any success with this. They are not prepared to change who they have been to become somebody that they want to be. I'm going to talk a little bit about more of that just in an upcoming point. Number 4, create your own map. There's this big myth out there that there is a single solution that exists. And we've done this our whole lives. Like, we jump from one program to another and assuming that program is going to fix us. So here, as an example, here's a single solution that a lot of people probably know about, P90X, which I have, by the way, and it's a great program. But people see that on TV and they go, that's it. That's the program that's going to change my life. That's not how this works. There is no one single solution that is going to fix you. Weight Watchers in and of itself cannot fix you. You name any program out there, even paleo in and of itself will not fix you in its entirety. It will provide answers to some of your questions, but this is far-reaching. This is far more complex than just simply diet and exercise. And you need to basically create your own map that is going to guide you to this place that you want to end up at. So you need to invent your own solutions, solve your own problem. And the idea is to search for clues wherever you can find them. And I'm going to give you an example right now of a clue that I found in a business book. And I read a lot of business books. I do not read any books that have to do with weight loss, just because I don't find that I get the answers that I'm looking for. However, let's jump into number 5. I love this idea. This is a new idea that I've been working with people over on my site, the Make Shift Happen. And it's called Learn to Pivot. And I want to give you a definition of pivot. I took this concept from a book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. It was a New York Times bestseller. It came out in 2010. It's a phenomenal book. And as I was reading the book, I kept thinking, wow, this is exactly what needs to happen with weight loss. That everything he talked about with regards to building a business, a lean startup, was exactly what people should be doing with their bodies. So a pivot is a change in strategy without a change in vision. So obviously you have to know where you are going on this journey. You have to know to where you're trying to get to. The idea of a pivot is you try something, and if it doesn't work, instead of abandoning the whole thing, you take what works, you simply discard whatever is not working, and then you make a slight change in course and you try something else. So let me go back, for example, to P90X. One of the things that I love the program. It's an amazing program. Tony Horton did a fantastic job with that program. But what I found doesn't work for me is it's very, very time consuming. Like, it's a lot of time to ask people to put in. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it is a lot, and it's intense, and every day you got to bring it, and it kind of wears you down after a while. And so I found that for me, it was tough to always commit an hour. Sometimes it's an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and a half. It just wasn't realistic for me. So what I did, instead of abandoning the whole program, is that sometimes I only do half a workout. I will do, again, I might only do 30 minutes of one of his workouts. He's got a yoga one that's an hour and a half. I actually break that up into 2 segments that I do over the course of 2 days. So begin to embrace this idea that it doesn't need to be all or nothing, that everything that you participate in is going to have some things that you can pull out of it that will be really useful on your journey. Take those, use them, and then discard the things that don't work, and then move on to see if you can find something else that will help you continue on your journey, and going back to what I just said, number 4, so that you can create your own map. Number 6, eliminate decisions. Brian Wansink wrote a book called Mindless Eating. It's a really fascinating book, and he's a scientist. All he does is studies basically human behavior in terms of things that we do while we're eating. And the bottom line is we are very much mindless eaters. We think that we're not. We think that we're very aware of what we put in our mouths and our bodies and how much we eat. And in fact, it's the opposite. We are horrible estimators at what we do. But decisions, one of the things he talked about was the fact that we make about 200 decisions about food every single day, which blew me away. Now, again, I don't care whether or not you think that that's even accurate or not. It doesn't matter. The point is we make a lot of decisions that come down to our eating. Decisions are taxing. It wears us down. It is why we mess up, is because we are constantly being barraged with this massive dose of decisions that we have to make. And you know this. You come home from work, you're exhausted, you've had a crappy day at work, you get home and you stand in front of the fridge and you're looking in there and there's not enough food and you don't know what you want. And so we end up gravitating to something quick. And usually quick means it's not great for us. So the idea would be to try and eliminate as many decisions as you can. And a few suggestions would be you create an eating plan, for example, so that if you're eating three large meals a day, then on Monday for breakfast, you already know what you're having for breakfast on Monday. And you also know what you're having for dinner on Tuesday and what you're having for lunch on Wednesday and breakfast on Friday. You already know in advance what you're having so that when you wake up Monday morning, you know what you're going to have for breakfast, and you have already bought the food so that that is available when you need to make that meal. Something else would be, again, creating a shopping list. So instead of going into the store, if you already know what meals you're going to have, then you already have a prepared list of the things that you need to buy, so you have the foods in the house that you need to make the things that you want. So really, really important. This continues to evolve for me. I mean, ideally, I'd like to not have to make any decisions at all. That, of course, that'll never happen, but that's the goal. That's the impossible goal, is to get to the point where I literally have everything automated. So I don't have to think about anything. I know that on this day I do this workout at this time and all those sorts of things. Number 7, decide in advance. I really like this. I stole the idea from a guy by the name of Sasha Ditchter. He did a TED Talk about deciding in advance, and he was talking about it because he wanted to be more generous. So he decided in advance how he would respond when people asked for money, because we all typically do the same thing. Our default notion is to say no. So we also have default notions when we are out in social situations with our friends, when we go to weddings, when we're on an airplane, all those sorts of things. The idea of deciding in advance is a really powerful tool for improving willpower, because people think that willpower is this magical thing that just happens. You know, if you look at somebody who seems to have a lot of it, you say, wow, they're so lucky they've got willpower. But the truth is, willpower is something that we build over time because we decide in advance how we're going to act, and we think through all the possible obstacles that we might encounter and what we would do when those things happen, so that when a situation does happen, we're ready for it. We know what we're going to do. We know how we're going to respond. Number 8, I wrote about this in my book, actually, and I think it was the second chapter. Be the expert on you. Too many people get into this and they turn over their decision-making to somebody else. We want somebody else to solve our problem for us. And I did that for 25 years. I kept, again, I bought P90X and I thought, oh, baby, this is it. This is going to fix me. The truth is, nobody else can fix me. Only I can fix me. And it wasn't until I was 45 that I realized the flaw that I had made all these years is I kept thinking that somebody else had the solution for me. And the truth was, it was my job to find my solution that was going to fix me. So you can't just simply blindly follow others. And when you get to this point where you become the expert on you, you begin to ask better questions. You don't say, tell me what to do, which is not a question. Actually, that's more of a statement. I guess it's a question. It's a bad question, but you start asking why. Why do you do the thing? Why do you do that? How do you think when you're doing that? How do you overcome this obstacle and that obstacle? So when we take ownership of our own success, we begin to put a whole different series of questions and a thought process and a mindset into place that really, really helps us begin to make some strides in terms of where we want to go. Number 9, determine your level of forgiveness. And I'm actually talking about your body. And I'm asking you to determine how forgiving it is. the reason that most people struggle in this area is that, so for example, here's a common thing when you, especially in the paleo world, a lot of people go, I'm 80-20. 80-20 works for me. And my question to people is always this: how do you know 80-20 works for you? And how exactly did you come up with 80-20? And the truth is, people pulled it out of their butt. They just say, no, I'm 80-20. Really? How do you measure that? How do you know you're 80-20? How did you get to the point where you said you were 80-20? And the reality is, most people, 80-20, that's too much leeway. That most people need to be somewhere in the range of 90-10 or 95-5, especially at the early stages. You might be able to let up a little bit once you've had some success, but not a lot. But 80-20 is that's too much wiggle room for most people. And I can say that because that's exactly what I had to learn for myself. 80-20 was too much wiggle room for me. I don't have an 80-20 kind of body. My body is not very forgiving. I don't. As a matter of fact, last night I went to Starbucks and I had they had this thing in Canada where every 15 drinks you get they send you this bonus. You can get a bonus drink. So I had a latte, which I haven't had in months and months and months. And I came home and I was bloated and I felt fat. And it was one latte and I'm like, man, and it had been 4 months. Don't whine and complain about it. I just made a little note. It's like, yeah, you know what? That's the last time I'll be having that. I just don't have the body type to be able to consume that stuff at any point, really. So determine your level of forgiveness. It's probably less than you think it is. So you may have to reevaluate that. Number 10, and I'm not saying this to take the wind out of your sails, but you never arrive. And what I mean by that is you're never going to get to a point where you've got it all figured out. And I made this mistake. So when I started the whole paleo thing about March of 2011, things were rocking along pretty good. And I thought, all right, I got this all figured out, and I am on easy street now. And you know what? It doesn't get any easier. Sorry, let me rephrase that. It's always going to be work. And I realize now it will be work for the rest of my life. And this is a really bad example, but it's because I've never been one, and I'm, I probably shouldn't even use this as an example, but it's like people who, alcoholics. I do know it runs in our family, so I have some knowledge of this. But alcoholism is not an easy thing to get over. And even once somebody manages to get it under control, it's not like it's easy. They still have tough decisions to make every day. It's just that they continue to make the right decisions each and every day. But they've got to work really hard because you could slip in a heartbeat. And it's the same thing with this stuff. It doesn't get any easier, but you do have a lot more strategies in place to deal with a lot of the unknowns that come your way. You get a lot better at making the tough decisions that we don't want to make right now, where you turn down that slice of pizza, where I say, no, thank you. I'm not going to use that special card that I was given. I'll give it away, or I'll just buy a regular coffee with it, or those sorts of things. Those are the kinds of things that become a lot easier to do over time. But you will never simply arrive at some point. Number 11, accept full responsibility for your situation. You are where you are because of the things that you've done. Now, I'm going to read to you. This is a Facebook comment that I pulled off some Facebook page months and months ago. This woman said, I am constantly sabotaged from all sides. Mom and dad next door, my husband, teenagers, or even my church's monthly dinner. And I remember reading it and I thought, wow, she is never, ever going to change how she looks, because she's not to blame. She has, basically, everybody else on the freaking planet is responsible for her failure. And the truth is, nobody else can sabotage us. Nobody else can make me eat food unless they hold me down and they're literally stuffing it in my mouth. And I have to be honest, I haven't had that happen yet. That's the only way that I would be able to say somebody sabotaged my eating. Otherwise, everything is a choice. Everything is a decision. So, even if people serve food that I don't normally eat, I don't have to eat it. I can choose to eat it, but I don't have to eat it. But if you are going to have any success with this, you need to accept full responsibility for your actions. And a great book to read, if you want to learn more about that, Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great, and he was talking about how good companies became great companies. And one of them was that they accepted full responsibility for their situation. So when you look at a company like Southwest Airlines, for example, when 9/11 hit and all the planes weren't flying and those sorts of things, they still turned a profit that year. Every other airline lost money, but they managed to still turn a profit. And because when they approach it, it's like, yes, you know what, these things are going on, but that doesn't give us an excuse to fail. It doesn't mean that we can't find other ways to turn a profit. And that's exactly the same mindset that we need to take on this journey to change how we look. Number 12, focus on consistency. This is probably the biggest problem I think that most people have, is that they don't do anything long enough. Sorry, there's two parts to this problem. They don't do the right things, and then they don't do anything long enough to reap the benefits of what they've done. And again, and part of this is this quick fix mentality, because there's this myth out there that people manage to do this in a very short period of time. So people are really expecting miracles to happen in 30 days. And, for every person where something seems to happen really fast, there are 100 other people that had to work their butts off for 6 to 9 months or a year before things really started to kick in. So the question that I ask myself when it comes to consistency, I jumped ahead to the wrong one. But for example, consistency is one of the reasons that I did not join a gym this time around. And the reason I didn't join a gym was I didn't want any excuses about why I couldn't work out if, for example, I was traveling, or if I was at a friend's cottage for the weekend, or something like that. I wanted to be able to consistently do the workouts that I had planned, regardless of where I was. And so I consciously made a decision that I would learn to do my workouts within the context of the environment that I was in. So, that means that I basically look at any of the equipment that I have, and I got to try and figure out a workout based on what I have access to. So this, again, just to sort of end that point off, try to find out the things that work and continue to, play those. That was horribly worded. Consistency is just basically find the things that work for you and continue to do those day in and day out, or whatever your schedule is, so that you get the results that you want. Number 13, we're almost done, kids. Sustainability is the biggest issue. Now, if you've read Sean's book, The Dark Side of Fat Loss, he leads out with this quote: 95% of people who lose weight put it all back on again. And I got to tell you, I was blown away by that. And what I realized, and nobody's talking about this, everybody thinks that weight loss is the biggest challenge, and it's not. It's the second biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is the weight that you've lost, being able to keep it off. And you probably know this. You have probably lost weight, and you have put that weight back on again, haven't you? Come on, you're nodding your head with me. I know you are. It's a problem for everybody. We manage to lose weight, but we can't keep it off. And this is where I jumped ahead on the last one. Here's a question that I ask myself now when I'm going to partake in something. Can I do this 5 years from now? Because there are things that we can do that in the short term can gain results, but they will not be sustainable long term. And let me tell you a quick story. I was chatting with a girl that I went to university with. We were exchanging emails. And she was like me. We were both heavy. Like, we were both, again, sort of 30 or 40 pounds overweight in university. And she's still struggling as well with her weight. So when I asked her how she was doing with that, she said, "Oh, I'm working with this trainer now, and he has taught me that it is okay to go to bed hungry." And I can't tell you, my head dropped when I read that email, because I thought, that's not sustainable. We're not supposed to be going to bed hungry. That's your body saying, "You're starving me, feed me." And the problem is, at some point, if it's voluntary starvation, at some point the body is going to rebel, and you're not going to be able to keep that up. So whatever it is that you commit to, it needs to be sustainable long term. And so you might want to consider asking yourself the question, can I do this 5 years from now? Number 14, everything matters. I kind of like this one, actually. This was another important insight for me. When most people think that this is really a journey into changing the foods that I eat and exercising, it's not. This is we look the way we look because of the way that we live. Sorry, let me rephrase that a little bit better. How we look is a product of how we live our life. So you need to look at all aspects of your life, not just the foods that you eat, not just the exercise that you do, but you also need to take a look at the relationships that you're in. Because if you're in broken relationships, that will keep you from getting to where you want to go. And you know this already on some level. You already know that those things suck the life out of you. So if you're not fixing a broken relationship, there is no way that you're going to have any sustained success. Sorry, I sound like I said sex. That's not what I wanted to say. Sustained success with this if you don't fix broken relationships. If you are doing work that you do not like, it's going to be the same thing. It is sucking the life out of you, and that takes energy away from these other tough decisions that you have to make in other areas of your life. Same thing with lifestyle. Same thing with money. Same thing with mindset. If you've got this mindset where you're constantly beating yourself up and you can't do anything right, if you don't fix those things, there is no way that you're going to be able to change how you look. It wipes out all the other work that you've done because at some point you end up again binge eating or whatever it happens to be because these other things have not been taken care of. And last but not least, unravel the mystery, which is you. And quite frankly, for me personally, what I realized was, and it just ties into what I just said in the last one, how I look is a product of how I live. And that really, all these things that I do, these foods that I eat, these things that I have that I shouldn't have, there are reasons why I do what I do. And if I am not willing to dig into that and really find out who I am and why I'm doing these things and how I can go about changing them, then I will never, ever change I'll never change how I look. I'll never have any long-term success changing how I look. I can force my body short-term. And again, we've all had that success short-term. But if you don't take a look at who you are and begin to unravel that mystery and begin to dig into why you're doing what you're doing, and I'm not talking about counseling sessions or psychiatrists or anything else. I'm just talking about brutal honesty. Just saying, one of the realizations I came to is that when I get stressed, I crave junk food. So junk food's not the issue for me. It's my stress. And it usually revolves around work. And so if I'm not dealing with a specific work issue, that tends to stress me out. And when I get stressed, I don't get grumpy when I get stressed. I either get really sleepy or I crave junk food. Those are the two things. So, I now know that there's something going on that I'm not dealing with. It's the same with you. You've got to begin to take a look at, you are the person holding you back. And if you don't recognize that, if you don't acknowledge that, and if you don't do something to change that, then again, you're just going to continue. I will guarantee you 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, you're going to be in the same place you are right now. And you're going to be saying, well, I just haven't found the right thing yet, or whatever it happens to be. Unravel the mystery that is you. So there you go. There are the 15 things that I wish that I had known when I had started this 20 years ago. To be honest, I actually have a list, and I'm not lying when I say this. I have a list of 115 things that I put down. Obviously, I couldn't share all 115 because this would have been a podcast that would be 10 hours long, and I think that's a little long for a podcast. That's just me, but I think 10 hours is long. So listen, here are my parting words. I've got 3 things I want to say to you. Number 1, start creating your own rules. Take ownership of this. Make this your own thing. Create your own map, but create your own rules, your own theories, which is number 2. Develop your own theories. I mentioned my book earlier, Make Shift Happen. That's all that book is. That book was me going through, stealing ideas from other people and dino-sizing them. I basically, made them applicable to me, and I put a unique twist on them so they reflected my journey, who I am, how my body responds to those sorts of things. And the last thing that I want to leave you with is I do have a website I mentioned earlier. It's called makeshifthappen.org. If any of this stuff resonates with you, I mentioned that I've currently got this. I'm a big believer in this idea that if we really want to change how we look, then we need to focus on the life that we're leading and specifically the work that we're doing. The mindsets that we have, those sorts of things. So I've got some blog posts. I've also got some other items on there that you can take a look at. If you like what you see, I've also got a podcast. You can follow that. Subscribe at the blog, and I'll give you all the updates. Otherwise, listen, thank you so much for giving me your time today. And if you got to the end and you have any questions, feel free to email me at dean@makeshifthappen.org. I'd be more than happy to help in any way that I can. Although I have to be honest, when most people ask me questions, I basically push the questions back on you because, again, it is your job. It's not my job to figure you out. It's your job to figure you out. And so I try to push back and get people to begin to speculate about why they're doing what they're doing, etc. But you can still email me, and I'd be more than glad to. I always answer my emails. So thank you very much. Have a great day, Sean. Looking forward to having you back, my friend. Thank you for doing what you do. Take care, everybody. Ciao.
Blog Talk Radio, where millions of hosts and listeners gather.